They will tell you that you are confused. They will insist your memory is wrong, your perception distorted, your emotions exaggerated. And the longer you remain, the more you whisper to yourself, "Am I losing my mind?" Gaslighting is not a strike against the body, but a war upon your perception of reality itself. It is the art of erasing your inner compass and replacing it with another's script. The manipulator whispers, "If I can make you doubt yourself, I will never again face the terror of being doubted." Their conquest of you is meant to shield them from their own abyss. Victims often ask, "Did they ever love me?" If by love we mean authentic recognition, the answer is no. You were valued, but only as material for their power. And yet the irony remains. If you were targeted, it is because you possessed something worth extinguishing: independence, clarity, strength. Manipulators do not waste effort on those already subdued. To stand again and declare, "My perception matters, my memory matters, my feelings matter," this is the final rebellion, the triumph of truth over distortion. They will tell you that you are confused. They will insist your memory is wrong, your perception distorted, your emotions exaggerated. At first you laugh at such accusations. You think, surely they jest, surely it is a small misunderstanding. But the longer you stay in their presence, the more your laughter dies, until you find yourself staring into the mirror and whispering, "Am I losing my mind?" This is the essence of gaslighting, the most insidious form of abuse, for it does not strike the body directly but gnaws at the roots of the self. It is the art of erasing a person's inner compass and replacing it with the abuser's script. It is a crime not of fists but of words and silences, of staged forgetfulness, of deliberate contradictions spoken with a calm smile. It is war waged upon your perception of reality itself. I have long said that the gravest battles are not fought with swords but with interpretations. To dominate another is not to chain their body but to rewrite the meaning of their experiences. When your tormentor convinces you that you have misunderstood what you saw, when they deny what was undeniable, when they cast doubt on your most basic memories, they seize the throne of your consciousness. And once seated there, they need not even raise their voice. You will do the work of suppressing yourself. Consider how easily a mind can be bent when it is isolated. My friend Soren Kierkegaard once wrote of the sickness unto death, despair that is unaware of itself. Gaslighting manufactures precisely this, despair hidden under the guise of perhaps I am too sensitive, perhaps I remember wrongly, perhaps I am to blame. Each perhaps is a nail in the coffin of confidence. The victim becomes their own jailer. The covert abuser thrives on subtleties. Unlike the brute who raises his hand in violence, the covert manipulator cultivates plausible deniability. If confronted, they shrug, "I never said that," or "You misheard," or "It was only a joke." Their cruelty always carries the mask of ambiguity, and ambiguity, repeated daily, corrodes certainty more surely than open aggression. Psychologists of our century have studied this corrosion. Research into what is called cognitive dissonance reveals how the mind twists itself into knots to resolve contradiction. When your partner denies what you clearly witnessed, you are faced with two incompatible realities. Either they lie or you are mistaken. To preserve the relationship, for the human creature clings to connection as to oxygen, you will often sacrifice your own certainty. Better to doubt yourself than to admit betrayal. Thus the manipulator wins not by force, but by exploiting your need for belonging. Hidden manipulation flourishes most in intimate spaces. It is the spouse who says you imagine their cruelty, the parent who insists your childhood wounds never occurred, the colleague who undermines your competence while praising you to others, the friend who jokes at your expense but insists you lack humor. Covert abuse is rarely spectacular. It is the steady drip of poison, each drop too small to provoke outrage, but together forming a river that drowns the spirit. I have heard it said by my friend Sigmund Freud that repression guards the gates of consciousness, yet repression is not always self-born. Gaslighting is the external imposition of repression. You are trained to repress your instincts, your recollections, your very cries of pain. The abuser becomes the arbiter of what counts as real. And soon, You are living in their invented theater, doubting every line you thought you remembered from your own script. Let us examine why this tactic is so devastating. Human beings are not constructed of stone, they are woven of narratives. My friend William James described consciousness as a stream, flowing without cease, with each thought tinted by those preceding it. Gaslighting pollutes this stream at its source. If you are convinced your memory cannot be trusted, the stream becomes murky. If you are persuaded your emotions exaggerate reality, you begin to fear the current itself. And if you doubt the evidence of your senses, you may as well be blindfolded in your own life. The covert abuser knows this. They know that to sever you from your senses is to make you pliable. Imagine a compass needle magnetized away from true north. Every step you take leads you further astray, yet you feel certain of your direction. Such is the plight of the gaslit soul. Why does this succeed? Because every human craves coherence. The psyche abhors chaos. If someone you trust insists that events unfolded differently, you grasp for reconciliation. You would rather believe you misheard than believe you are loved by one who lies. You would rather blame your forgetfulness than confront deliberate cruelty. Thus, to maintain coherence, you sacrifice truth. You call betrayal a misunderstanding. You rename cruelty as stress. You reframe neglect as oversight. In doing so, you collaborate in your own diminishment. But what is the cost? Slowly, your will erodes. Your confidence thins. You cease to act boldly, for each act may be labeled a mistake. You cease to speak freely, for each word may be twisted. You cease to trust your memory, for each recollection may be contradicted. And so, piece by piece, you vanish. This vanishing is not immediate. That is the mastery of covert abuse. It proceeds by increments. One lie here, one denial there, one mocking laugh today, one sigh of disappointment tomorrow. No single event justifies flight. Yet across years, the cumulative weight becomes unbearable. Victims often say, "I feel like I am losing myself." Indeed, for the manipulator has fed upon the self until little remains. There is an old strategy in war. Cut off the enemy's supply lines and they will wither without a direct battle. Gaslighting cuts off the supply lines of self-trust. And without trust in your senses, your memory, your feelings, you are forced to rely on the abuser for guidance. They become your distorted compass, your corrupted historian, your interpreter of meaning. My friend Hannah Arendt once warned that the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced fanatic, but the person for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, true and false, no longer exists. Gaslighting is the domestic version of this totalitarianism. It creates subjects who no longer distinguish their own experience from the abuser's narrative. And once this confusion is achieved, domination is complete without a single blow. There is also pleasure for the abuser in this domination. To watch another doubt themselves, to see them surrender their judgment, is intoxicating. The covert manipulator feeds upon the victim's disorientation as the tyrant feeds upon obedience. Both cloak their appetite in rationalizations. "I only want what is best for you. You misunderstood me. You are too sensitive." But beneath these phrases lies the simple hunger for control. Yet we must not only condemn, we must understand. Why does covert abuse arise? It arises from weakness disguised as strength. The abuser lacks the courage to wield open violence or honest argument. Instead, they cloak themselves in ambiguity, for they know that ambiguity confuses longer than aggression. They are architects of doubt because they fear confrontation with truth. Still, to recognize this dynamic is already to weaken it. The first defense against hidden manipulation is naming it. When you can say, "This is gaslighting," you reclaim the language that was stolen. You refuse to let the abuser define reality unchallenged. Language becomes your shield. Truth becomes your anchor. Consider an experiment in psychology known as the illusory truth effect. It shows that repetition alone makes statements feel more believable, even when they are false. The covert abuser relies upon this principle instinctively. By repeatedly denying your memories, they make you doubt them. By consistently labeling your emotions as overreactions, they make you suppress them. but knowledge of this effect empowers you. When you hear the denial, you can whisper inwardly, "This is the mechanism at work, not my failure of memory." I must also pause to address those who may be listening not as victims, but as potential manipulators. If you find yourself tempted to control another through denial and distortion, recognize that you, too, are enslaved. For domination is not freedom. He who must warp the perception of others is already trapped in his own cowardice. True strength lies in standing naked before reality, not in dressing it in disguises. And yet those trapped in covert abuse often feel no strength remains in them. They are told daily that they are weak, fragile, hysterical, unreliable. What comfort can be offered? Let it be said clearly, to doubt your memory under such assault is not weakness. It is the natural effect of systematic deception. To feel confusion is not shameful. It is evidence of your humanity. The shame belongs not to the confused, but to the confuser. There is hope, for the psyche retains a stubborn core. My friend Carl Jung spoke of the self, the totality of our being that seeks wholeness. Even when every surface of consciousness is clouded with doubt, there remains a subterranean voice that whispers, "This is not right." It may be faint, but it persists. Covert abusers cannot extinguish it, though they may bury it. To listen to that voice, to nurture it, is the beginning of liberation. At this juncture, I would remind you of something unusual. In a world where countless voices shout for attention, where manipulation is not confined to private relationships but saturates politics, media, even the marketplace, the capacity to discern hidden influence is the most vital of powers. If you wish to strengthen that capacity, to cultivate an ear trained for subtlety and a mind sharpened against distortion, then remain with these reflections. Do not pass them by. Just as one who reads deeply strengthens the intellect, one who returns to such exploration strengthens the spirit. That is why I invite you, if these words speak to your struggle, to continue this dialogue beyond a single moment, to return again, to subscribe in the truest sense. Not with a click alone, but with your commitment to think fiercely, to question courageously, to live awake. Let us return to the anatomy of hidden manipulation. One of its organs is projection. The abuser accuses you of what they themselves enact. If they are unfaithful, they accuse you of betrayal. If they lie, they accuse you of dishonesty. If they are cruel, they accuse you of insensitivity. This tactic disorients you further, for you are forced into defensive posture, explaining yourself rather than examining them. Projection functions as smoke that blinds you from the fire at its source. Another organ is trivialization. Your concerns are belittled, your grievances mocked, your wounds dismissed as petty. Why make such a big deal? It was nothing. You always exaggerate. Each phrase chips away at the dignity of your pain. Over time, you internalize this dismissal until you hesitate even to name your suffering. What cannot be named festers. A third organ is withdrawal. Silence can be as manipulative as speech. When the abuser refuses to respond, when they turn their face away, when they withhold affection as punishment, you are left starving. And in your starvation, you will accept any crumb, even if it is laced with cruelty. Thus, silence becomes a leash, pulling you toward compliance. The covert abuser is also skilled in timing. They alternate cruelty with charm, doubt with reassurance. After days of dismissal, they may shower you with sudden affection. After weeks of coldness, they may confess tenderness. This cycle is not random, it is reinforcement. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement, known to create the strongest bonds in laboratory animals. The victim clings desperately, hoping the affection will return. They believe compliance will bring back the warmth. Thus they remain trapped in the cycle, confusing captivity with love. My friend Erich Fromm once said that the greatest human need is not to be loved, but to escape isolation. The covert manipulator knows this. They exploit your fear of loneliness. They suggest, subtly or openly, that no one else would tolerate you, that you are lucky to have them, that your complaints will drive others away. And so you endure the distortion, for the alternative seems to be abandonment. Yet to recognize these tactics is to loosen their grip. When you see the pattern, you can whisper, "This is projection. This is trivialization. This is withdrawal. This is intermittent reinforcement. Naming is power. What is unnamed tyrannizes. What is named can be resisted. Still, resistance is not simple. The victim of covert abuse is often bound by ties of love, obligation, or dependence. To leave may mean to shatter a family, to lose financial security, to face solitude. That is why so many remain, enduring quietly until their spirit cracks. Judgment from the outside, why not just leave? Fails to grasp the labyrinth inside. One does not walk easily out of a maze when one has been blinded. Thus, compassion is required. When you encounter a soul enmeshed in gaslighting, do not demand swift escape. Offer instead the steady mirror of affirmation. Your feelings are real. Your memory is valid. Your pain is not imaginary. These simple statements are antidotes to years of denial. They restore faith in perception. They water the roots of self-trust. I must speak also of the broader field in which this poison thrives. We live in societies that often reward deception. Advertising tells you that you lack what you already possess. Politicians assure you that black is white if it secures their power. Institutions rewrite history to glorify themselves. In such a climate, covert abuse is not an aberration but a reflection. It is the private version of public lies. To resist it in one's home is also to resist it in one's culture. Do you see the danger? If individuals learn to accept distortion in their intimate lives, they become accustomed to distortion everywhere. The citizen who doubts their own memory at home will doubt their own judgment in the public square. Thus, private manipulation becomes the training ground for mass manipulation. The health of personal relationships is inseparable from the health of societies. Gaslighting, then, is not merely a psychological curiosity. It is a political fact, a cultural fact, a spiritual fact. It is the attempt to sever humanity from its anchor in reality. And to sever that anchor is to set the ship adrift in storms where any tyrant may seize the helm. I have given you in these reflections an anatomy of hidden manipulation. But the anatomy is not complete. It extends into deeper chambers. To understand further, we must descend into the origins of the abuser's psyche, the survival strategies of the victim, the slow rebirth of self-trust. Why does the covert manipulator behave as they do? If we are to resist, we must first comprehend. There is no magic here, only the same ancient drives that shape all human beings: fear of rejection, thirst for control, hunger for recognition. But in the abuser, these drives are twisted into weapons. The seed is insecurity. Beneath the mask of superiority often lies a frightened child who once felt powerless. Instead of confronting this wound directly, they build elaborate strategies to never feel powerless again. They discover that by eroding the certainty of others, they can prevent others from wounding them. Thus, their cruelty is not random. It is a defense that metastasized into domination. My friend Alfred Adler spoke of the inferiority complex. He saw that those who feel most inadequate often compensate by striving for superiority. Gaslighting is one such compensation. The manipulator whispers, "If I can make you doubt yourself, then I will never again face the terror of being doubted." Their conquest of you is meant to shield them from their own inner abyss. But what begins as a shield becomes a prison. For when one builds identity upon the subjugation of others, one can never rest. The manipulator must constantly reinforce their superiority, constantly deny, dismiss, distort, lest their victim glimpse the truth. Their life becomes endless performance, and in performance there is no intimacy. Even their apparent tenderness is calculated, for it serves the script of control. This is why covert abuse feels so haunting. You sense that behind the words there is no authentic self, only strategies. And to love a strategy is to starve. Victims often ask, "Did they ever love me?" It is a cruel question, for the answer depends on what we mean by love. If by love we mean authentic recognition of another's being, then no, the manipulator cannot love, for they are too busy defending themselves against reality. But if by love we mean the dependency of a drowning man on the raft he clings to, then yes, they love. but only as one loves a tool. This distinction must be faced, painful though it is. The psyche of the victim adapts in its own tragic ways. When exposed to repeated denial, many develop what psychologists call learned helplessness. In experiments, animals exposed to unavoidable shocks eventually ceased trying to escape, even when escape became possible. So too, the gaslit soul eventually ceases to argue, ceases to protest, ceases even to think independently. They accept the manipulator's reality not because it convinces, but because resistance feels futile. Yet within this adaptation lies paradox. Even as the victim conforms outwardly, inwardly resentment builds. But resentment is dangerous, it corrodes from within. It may erupt in sudden rage, which the manipulator then seizes upon as proof of the victim's instability. "See," they say, "you are the crazy one." Thus, the victim's attempt to assert themselves becomes further evidence against them. This cycle is diabolical in its simplicity. Provoke confusion, deny responsibility, await the victim's eruption, then use the eruption to justify further control. The manipulator need only be patient. How then can one break free? The first step is recognition. To name the abuse is to shine light upon the shadows. The second step is external witness. Alone, the victim doubts themselves, but when another affirms their perception, the spell cracks. This is why communities, friendships, and therapy matter. They provide mirrors in which the victim sees their own sanity reflected. My friend Viktor Frankl, who endured unspeakable manipulation in the camps, wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude. Even in the darkest coercion, one may say inwardly, "I am not mad, I see what I see." This inner stance is the seed of freedom. Yet freedom requires more than inward resolve, it requires outer boundaries. To say no is the most radical act in the presence of gaslighting. Each refusal reclaims territory. At first, the victim may tremble. Am I wrong? Am I cruel? But with each boundary drawn, self-trust grows. Eventually, the manipulator's denials lose their force, for they collide with a wall of certainty that will not yield. Still, escape is rarely simple. Ties of dependency bind tightly. Consider the child whose parent is the abuser. They cannot simply leave. They must instead cultivate secret inner rooms where the manipulator's voice cannot enter. These inner sanctuaries preserve the child's sanity until they can one day choose outward freedom. The strength of such children astonishes me. They are philosophers before their time, questioning the apparent reality forced upon them. There is also the case of those who stay not from dependency but from hope. They believe, if I love them enough, they will change. Hope can be noble, but in such cases it becomes a snare. For the manipulator interprets endurance not as love but as license. Each day endured becomes proof that their strategy works. Change, therefore, rarely comes from within the manipulator. It must be demanded from without or not at all. I must speak of the broader psychological consequences. Long exposure to covert abuse often leads to what clinicians describe as complex trauma. Unlike a single violent event, this trauma arises from repeated, subtle violations. It manifests in hypervigilance, difficulty trusting, dissociation, depression. The victim learns to scan every word for hidden meanings, every gesture for potential attack. Even after leaving the abuser, this scanning remains, as if the enemy might reappear at any moment. And yet, healing is possible. The very capacities sharpened in survival, sensitivity, vigilance, deep reflection, can become strengths in freedom. Many who escape gaslighting become exceptional at detecting dishonesty, attuned to the unspoken, fierce in their defense of truth. What once enslaved them becomes their instrument of liberation. Let us examine one particular mechanism, memory. Gaslighting attacks memory relentlessly. The manipulator says, "That never happened." Over time, the victim begins to doubt recollections. Neuroscience confirms that memory is malleable, susceptible to suggestion. But malleable is not the same as empty. The body remembers even when the mind doubts. Tension in the muscles, sudden flares of fear, unexplained grief, these are the echoes of truths denied. To listen to the body is to bypass the manipulator's script. Similarly, dreams often carry what waking denial suppresses. My friend Freud interpreted dreams as royal roads to the unconscious. When one is gaslit, dreams may present symbolic rebellions, voices crying, houses burning, chains breaking. To honor these dreams is to honor the truth still alive within. I turn now to the cultural mirrors of this phenomenon. Entire nations can be gaslit. When history is rewritten, when atrocities are denied, when propaganda insists that what you saw with your eyes did not occur, the populace experiences the same disorientation as the individual victim. To resist requires collective memory, rituals of remembrance, testimony from witnesses. Without these, societies too lose their compass and submit to distorted narratives. Thus, the personal and political are intertwined. To learn the anatomy of covert abuse in a marriage is to glimpse the anatomy of manipulation in empires. The same mechanisms, denial, projection, trivialization, withdrawal, are at work on both scales. And just as victims in families often ask, "Was I loved?" so too citizens ask of their leaders, "Were we ever valued?" The answer is equally painful. You were valued, but only as material for their power. Recognition of this truth is bitter, yet it is also clarifying. For clarity, even when cruel, is the foundation of freedom. At this point, let me offer a paradoxical comfort. If you have been targeted by gaslighting, it is because you possess something worth extinguishing. Independence of thought, clarity of perception, strength of will. Manipulators do not waste effort on those already subdued. They strike at those whose light threatens to expose them. Thus, your very suffering is evidence of your worth. To reclaim this perspective is to transmute pain into pride. But pride alone is not enough. One must cultivate what the ancients called parrhesia, fearless speech. To speak truth, even trembling, is to begin breaking the spell. The manipulator thrives on your silence. When you speak, you disrupt their theater. Even if your words are denied, they echo in your soul, reminding you that you are still alive. Remember, too, that no life is lived in isolation. The manipulator seeks to cut you off from allies, to convince you that no one else will believe you. This is their greatest lie. History teems with communities of solidarity, with friendships that restored sanity to the gaslit. Seek such companionship, and you will find that your story is not isolated but part of a larger struggle against deception. I must pause to challenge you. Do not listen to these words merely as a diagnosis of others. Look within. Have you ever dismissed another's pain, denied their perception, trivialized their wounds? The seed of manipulation dwells in all of us. To uproot it, we must cultivate radical honesty, both with ourselves and with others. To say, "I was wrong, I hurt you, I remember differently, but I will not erase your memory." Such confessions are the antidote to covert abuse. They build trust instead of corroding it. The deepest victory over gaslighting, then, is not merely to escape it but to vow never to inflict it. To live transparently, to honor the perceptions of others, to refuse the lazy weapon of denial, this is true strength. Some may say, but what if others misremember? Should we accept falsehoods to avoid gaslighting? No, honesty does not mean submission to every claim. It means engaging with respect. One can say, "I recall differently, but I will not dismiss your memory as madness." This is dialogue, not domination. It preserves dignity while seeking truth together. The victim of covert abuse often believes they are broken beyond repair. Yet the truth is otherwise. Survival itself is testimony of resilience. You endured years of denial and still you stand. You endured contradictions and still you question. You endured isolation and still you seek connection. This is not weakness, it is astonishing strength. The path ahead is not easy. Healing requires patience, compassion, and above all, truth. But truth has always been the most dangerous and the most liberating force. It burns illusions, but in its fire new life emerges. To embrace truth after gaslighting is to rise from the ashes of distortion and say, "I will no longer doubt my own eyes. I will no longer silence my own voice. I will no longer live in another's theater." There comes a moment when the fog begins to thin. It does not always arrive with drama. Often it comes quietly, like the first ray of light after a long night. You notice that a certain phrase, once so convincing, no longer holds its spell. You observe that the denial you have heard 100 times suddenly rings hollow. You realize that while you may still tremble, you no longer believe. This is the first sign of awakening, disbelief in the manipulator's theater. Awakening is perilous, for it provokes the abuser's greatest fear. They sense the loss of control and respond with increased tactics. They may shower you with affection, reminding you of old tenderness. They may escalate cruelty, hoping fear will tether you again. They may plead with promises of change. All of these are attempts to preserve their throne. But once you have glimpsed freedom, their throne is already cracking. What follows is a rebirth. Rebirth is never painless. The child leaves the womb only through struggle. So too, the soul leaves the cage of covert abuse through pain. There is grief for lost years, grief for trust betrayed, grief for the self that was silenced. There is rage at injustice, rage at one's own complicity, rage at a world that did not see. And there is fear of solitude, fear of the unknown, fear of becoming like the abuser. These emotions are not obstacles, they are labor pains. To suppress them is to prolong captivity. To honor them is to birth the new self. My friend Rollo may spoke of courage as not the absence of despair, but the capacity to move ahead despite despair. Courage in this context means choosing to rebuild identity even while the ruins still smoke. It means trusting your memory again, even when the echo of denial lingers. It means forming new relationships, even when fear of betrayal stalks you. Rebuilding begins with the smallest acts, writing down your memories to reclaim them, speaking aloud your story to someone who listens without contradiction, keeping a journal of your feelings and trusting them as valid. Each act is a brick in the foundation of a house where the manipulator cannot enter. There will be setbacks, triggers will stir doubt again. A word, a look, a certain silence will resurrect the old confusion. You may wonder, am I still trapped? But healing is not the absence of pain. It is the decision to no longer interpret pain as evidence against yourself. The wound may ache, yet you will know it is your wound, not your madness. Communities of healing offer profound support here. Survivors who share their stories create a counter-narrative that shatters isolation. To hear another say, "Yes, that happened to me too," is to feel reality restored. What was once dismissed as exaggeration becomes recognized as pattern. The victim becomes part of a chorus of truth, and in that chorus strength multiplies. I must return to the theme of power, for all abuse is about power. The manipulator seeks power by weakening the other, but true power is not found in domination, it is found in creation. The liberated soul learns this, to build rather than destroy, to affirm rather than deny, to love rather than control. In choosing creation, the survivor becomes stronger than the abuser ever was. Here lies the great irony. The manipulator sought to erase you, but in surviving, you become more real than before. You have confronted deception and chosen truth. You have lived in shadows and chosen light. You have been silenced and chosen speech. This choosing transforms suffering into wisdom. Some will ask, can the manipulator ever change? Change is possible, but it is rare. It requires them to abandon denial, to confess their strategies, to face their insecurity without disguises. Few are willing, for it demands dismantling the entire edifice of their control. But we must not place our healing in their hands. Their change is not your responsibility. Your liberation must not wait upon their transformation. There is, however, value in compassion even toward them. To see the manipulator as a frightened child trapped in strategies does not excuse their cruelty, but it frees you from hatred. Hatred keeps you chained to them. Compassion severs the chain. Compassion does not mean reconciliation. It means recognizing their weakness without allowing it to dictate your worth. Healing also requires confronting one's own susceptibility. Why did you believe? Why did you stay? The answers vary. Fear of abandonment, loyalty, hope, dependency. To face these honestly is not to blame yourself, but to understand the levers that were used. Once understood, those levers lose power. You become less manipulable, not by hardening into distrust, but by knowing yourself deeply. Here psychology and philosophy converge. Psychology names the mechanisms. Philosophy asks what it means to live freely in light of them. My own answer has always been that freedom is the courage to affirm reality as it is, even when painful. To say yes to what is real, rather than yes to illusions. In this sense, every survivor of gaslighting who reclaims their perception is a philosopher in action. Consider the role of memory in history. When societies deny their crimes, they gaslight their citizens. Healing requires truth commissions, testimonies, monuments, rituals of remembrance. Similarly, in the personal sphere, healing requires remembrance. To tell the story, to write it, to teach others, this is how wounds become wisdom. Silence perpetuates distortion. Remembrance restores dignity. Do not underestimate the beauty of this process, for from the ashes of covert abuse often rise souls of extraordinary clarity. They become guardians of truth, intolerant of lies, fierce protectors of others' dignity. What once was curse becomes calling. I remind you, do not walk alone. Isolation was the abuser's weapon. Community must be your remedy. Whether through friendships, support groups, or sacred gatherings, surround yourself with those who affirm reality rather than distort it. They will remind you in moments of doubt that you are sane, that your memory is intact, that your feelings are trustworthy. And when you are strong enough, extend this gift to others. Become the mirror that reflects their sanity, the witness who affirms their truth. In doing so, you complete the cycle, from victim to survivor to healer. Let me return once more to the beginning, to the moment of doubt in front of the mirror. Am I losing my mind? If you have ever asked this, know the answer: no. Your mind was under siege, but it endured. You are not broken, you are awakening. There is no final cure for the human condition. We are all vulnerable to deception, all susceptible to doubt. But we are also capable of extraordinary resilience. The path is not toward perfect invulnerability, but toward unshakable awareness. To know that manipulation exists, to recognize its signs, to refuse its theater, this is wisdom. In closing, let us remember what my friend Marcus Aurelius counseled. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Gaslighting tried to steal that power from you, convincing you that your estimates were worthless. Reclaim it. Say, my perception matters, my memory matters, my feelings matter. This is the true revocation of abuse. And so I end with affirmation. You who have endured covert manipulation, you who have doubted your own reflection, you who have lived in silence, you are not erased. You are still here. You are still capable of truth. You are still capable of creation. The theater of distortion may continue in the world, but within you there can be a stage of clarity, where reality speaks without denial, where love is free from control, where the self is whole. To live in such clarity is the greatest rebellion. It is the final liberation from hidden manipulation. It is the triumph of truth over distortion, of courage over fear, of reality over illusion.